Yeah, go ahead.
So I had a doubt regarding current controlled voltage source.
Yeah.
So if we have one such voltage source in a circuit, and
Hmm.
the one end of the voltage source is connected to the circuit, but the other end is open, and its voltage depends on the current in some other branch. So
Hmm.
will there still be a potential difference maintained across it?
Yeah. Because even if it's open, that's fine because voltage sources manage to. The really confusing thing would have happened if it were a current source. Because if one end is open in a current source or whatever, the current simply cannot flow, right?
Yes, sir.
But with one, say if you have a battery, let's say of 1.5 volts, a cell, does it have a voltage across them when you don't connect anything? Yes or no?
Yes, sir. It has.
Yeah, so the same answer here. If it's a current controlled voltage source, then even if one end is floating, then still there would be a voltage difference between that floating end and the other end. Now, if that end is not connected to anything, that will not make any difference to actual this to the circuit, right? Because that particular source, suppose you have a situation like this. Let me just okay. Let's hold on. Maybe I will need to bit. Okay, suppose I have something which looks like this. You can see my screen, right? All of you?
Yes, sir.
So suppose I have something which looks like this, all kinds of stuff going on somewhere else, and then you have a current controlled voltage source. There's some G times I, where I is some current here. The rest of the circuit, of course, has to be drawn, and this is not connected to anything else. So what this will ensure is that between this point and this point, there will be a potential difference of G times I. Okay, but this part will not carry any current, right? Because it can't. There's no current, no possibility of any current flow here. So even if you were to detach this from the circuit, it will make no difference. If your question is, will there be a potential difference between the two ends? The answer is yes. Okay. But if your question is, will that make a difference at all or not? The answer is no.
Okay, sir.
Could I make
Understood.
myself clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So any other questions?
Hello, sir.
Okay. Yeah. Go
Sir,
ahead.
hello.
Yeah, you are very faint. So can you just be a bit louder?
Yes, sir. Sir, in question number 4, sir,
Yeah.
I have converted this circuit into the Thevenin's equivalent.
Right.
So, sir, I want to confirm one thing that here
Okay, let me just
the
first, for the benefit of everybody else, let me see. I have question number 4 somewhere here. Let's say this is my problem sheet. You are referring to this question, right?
yes, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, I want to confirm one thing from you that in this circuit, the Thevenin voltage does not depend on this voltage current dependent voltage source. Is this
Okay,
statement is
so are you sure of that?
yes,
That actually is a bit of a problem. Okay, let me just point out why. Notice that when you say Thevenin, you are saying what is the power dropped across R, right? That's the question.
yes,
Find the value of this resistance R in the circuit below, which will lead to the maximum power transferred to it. So what you need to do is put R outside your black box, everything else. This whole thing should be inside your black box, right? Is that
yes, sir.
okay? So this part is inside your black box. So now Your open circuit voltage, the open circuit voltage that you need to calculate is the voltage between this point up here and this point, right?
Yes, sir.
That is, you open out R. So Thevenin voltage is the open circuit voltage. What that means is that you remove whatever you had connected across these two ends, just open this out and find out the voltage between these 2 points. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Fine. Now the voltage between these 2 points is actually not the same as the voltage between these 2 points, right? The voltage between these 2 points can be calculated rather easily using simple series parallel combinations, right? Is everybody with me so far? If I wanted the voltage between this point and this point, I can actually calculate this by saying that this is actually 8/14, 8 by 14, or actually 4 by 7 of this voltage, which I can calculate by essentially calculating the effective resistance here and working with it, right? Now, the question is this a series circuit, 6 and 8? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Why is this series? Can anybody explain that to me?
Sir, since no current is flowing through the current dependent voltage source, so effectively
Yeah.
it will be
So
in
that is a
series.
very important point. These two are nominally not in series. 6 and 8 are actually not in series because there's a branch. To be in series, the basic test is, does the same current flow through the two resistors? Here, whatever current flows through this, you usually will not flow through this, right? Because there's another branch which takes away some current. But when you have opened this out, this R is no longer there. That is, when you're trying to calculate the Thevenin voltage, you have removed the R. So basically what you're doing, let me just draw this circuit for my reference here. So what you're doing here is this. Two, you have a 4. I'm not writing the units here. That's bad, but still. 8. And then you have a plus a 0.5 Ix, and this is Ix. And you have a 30 volt source. Okay. And this is where you have the R connected. So this is basically what is inside my black box. This is outside. So when I connect the R here, I will ask the question as to how much power will go through R and so on. But in order to calculate the Thevenin voltage, what you need to do is find out the open circuit voltage here, which is the voltage here. Now, when this is open, no current can flow through this branch, because if you have an open circuit, simply current can't flow. So then you can feed 6 and 8 as they're in series. So basically, the open circuit voltage, okay, let me just label these points. I call that A, B, C, D. Then my open circuit voltage actually, is it actually 8 by 14, which is, okay, let me just write this properly first, VCD. This is nothing but the series potential division formula, 8 ohms, R by R plus R prime, 6 plus 14. Now times, now this voltage. Now how do you find out this voltage? For that you need 14 parallel with 4. That's of course 14 into 4 by 14 plus 4. But let me just write 14 parallel with 4 for the time being. That's the resistance across AB divided by 2 plus 14 parallel 4 times 30. So this is the resistance between C and D. Is this clear to everybody? Of course, when I say something like this, it actually means that if it is not clear to somebody, please speak up. This, of course, is elementary circuit analysis, so should not be much of a problem. But is that VOC? Yes or no? Yes?
No, sir. Not the VOC.
Yeah, it's not VOC. Why is it not VOC? Because this is the voltage between the point C and D, right? What you want is the voltage between this point and this point. Now this is at the same voltage as D, no problem, but this point is not at the same voltage as D. Okay, same answer as to the previous question. Current controlled voltage source, fine. There is a voltage difference between the 2 points. No current will flow through this, but if you want this voltage, you will definitely need to add 0.5 times Ix to that, right? So VOC is actually this voltage VCD, which we have just calculated, plus 0.5 times Ix. Ix, of course, is nothing but this result, that is 2 by 30 volts divided by 2 plus 14 parallel 4 ohms. Okay? So this is important. You need to calculate that VOC, right? And what about ISC? How do you calculate that? By the way, how do you calculate R Thevenin?
VOC by
VOC
ISC.
by IAC.
Yeah, right. When there is a controlled source inside, the shortcut for calculating R Thevenin would be just look in from this end, find out the equivalent resistance by switching off the source. But that works only if there are no control sources. If there are control sources, that will not work. So you will have to calculate VOC by ISC. Okay. And when you calculate VOC by ISC, you have to remember you have to short this. Now, when you short this, that actually tells you whatever current you have here, right? 0.5 times that is the drop here. So the current here is already fixed, because remember this thing is now in parallel to the 8. If they're in parallel, then the voltage drop across both sides are the same. So there has to be a 0.5 times I rise across 8. Is that clear to everybody? Instead of a drop across 8, there should be a 0.5 times I rise. Okay? So current will be flowing in this direction. Is that clear?
No, sir, please.
So you just find out which end is higher in potential, right? Because assuming, of course, that the current through Ix is actually in this direction, which it will be, because of the 30 volt source, the current goes this way, right? Has to. You should realize that a current flowing this way would go against the only power source in your circuit. That of course will not happen. So the current will flow this way. So Ix will be positive, even when you short this out. But when you short this out, among the points C and D, which will be at a higher potential?
D will be at a higher potential.
D will be at a higher potential. Look at this source. That will tell you that this is a minus here, plus here, right? So whatever is the current through this 2 ohm resistance, 0.5 times that current will be the voltage difference, and that will be higher on this side. So the current through 8 will be flowing this way. That is something you have to be careful about. So not only is this not a parallel circuit any longer, there is neither series nor parallel any longer, you do know the voltage here. So you can use that to find out the answer. It's pretty simple. All I'm saying is you have to be careful when you want to find the current through the short circuit. It's actually the current here, not minus the current here, but plus the current here, because both of them go into C. So whatever goes into C, of course, goes out through this branch. That's the short circuit current. Okay. So I don't know how many of you have gotten this right, because it's a bit tricky, especially getting the signs correct. Yeah.
Sir, we can apply the KVL in each of the loops and directly
Of course.
then
You can
get
you
the
can apply
current.
the
It
KVL
will
and find
just
the
come
current.
out to be negative, even if we take the opposite direction.
Yeah. If you use KVL properly, no problem will arise. When you say it will come out to be negative, you mean if you had made a mistake, you will get a negative sign. Right. That will work out fine, as long as you do it consistently. Okay. So one easy way to do it would be use the mesh method, simply. And that will be pretty easy to use. You just use the mesh method, put I1, I2, I3. And I3 is actually the short circuit current, so you just have to find out I3. That would actually be the cleanest and easiest way of finding out the answer. Yeah, Anurit?
Sir, could you please explain why is that shortcut not working when we have a controlled voltage source, and why is it working when we not have?
No, look, basically the idea is when you switch off the voltage source, basically the idea is why is it working when you switch off the voltage source? The basic idea is you want to make VOC equal. Look, this is your Thevenin equivalent, right? E Thevenin, R Thevenin. So if you look in through this, is the resistance equal to R Thevenin? Resistance, after all, the effective resistance across a terminal is the voltage across the terminal, that is voltage across these two terminals, these 2 points, divided by the current flowing. Now, is that equal to R Thevenin?
Yes, sir, yes.
No, it's not. It's not unless V Thevenin is 0.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The voltage, the resistance that you see across 2 terminals will be equal to the series resistance only if the series potential difference is not there. Otherwise, the voltage between these terminals, if you divide that by the current, you will not get R Thevenin, right? Is it okay?
Yes.
That sort of should be obvious, right?
So can you repeat it again?
So, when you say resistance, when you say you are seeing a resistance when you're looking across a pair of terminals, you may be using some results like series parallel division formula, etc., or other more complicated equations to find out the resistance. But ultimately, what is the resistance? The resistance is always voltage between those 2 terminals divided by the current flowing out of those terminals or into the circuit from that terminal, right? Is it okay?
Yes.
So that's the effective resistance that you see, is R. But will there be R Thevenin? The answer is no, because the voltage drop between these 2 terminals, will that be I times R Thevenin? You're saying you're looking at the voltage drop between the terminals V, and you're equating that to I times R Thevenin, right? And then
Yes,
you say voltage by current is R Thevenin. That's R. V by I is, of course, R. Right? Now, when will R be equal to R Thevenin? When V is actually equal to I R Thevenin. But that's possible only if V Thevenin is 0. Because the voltage between these 2 ends will be this current times R Thevenin plus this voltage, right?
Yes.
Both of these are drops. The voltage drop between here to here. Here, remember, I'm talking about current flowing this way, which means not the other convention where current was flowing out into the load resistance. Yes, current is flowing into the circuit. You're looking at this from the outside inwards. Okay, but if there were a V Thevenin, then of course V by I would not be R Thevenin. So the first step towards making R equal to R Thevenin, the effective resistance across the 2 ends equal to the Thevenin resistance, is to ensure that the Thevenin voltage is 0. Now, how do you make the Thevenin voltage 0?
Short the battery.
Basically, replace the battery by 0. Or all sources. Get rid of sources. Short a battery. If there's a current source, replace it by an open circuit. Okay? Right? But if you have controlled sources, it's not, okay, Shivam, you are right, but it's not remove the battery with a wire. Replace the battery with a wire would be a better thing to say. Yeah. Removing, you may actually effectively, you might even remove the battery with a wire by putting a wire across the battery that would short out the battery. But if you really did it in real life, that would be one sure shot way of starting a fire or at least damaging the battery, right? So basically you replace the battery with a wire. That's shorting. That's also called shorting the battery. But you don't really actually short the battery. That is, you don't keep the battery in place and put a short across it. That would be dangerous. But of course, when you're doing this in a calculation, doesn't matter. You can imagine putting a short across it. So if it's a battery, if it's a voltage source, you short it. Or strictly speaking, if it's a voltage source, you replace it with its internal impedance, which is 0 for an ideal source. So you short if it's an ideal source. If it's not an ideal source, you replace it with the low input impedance, low impedance which the source has. Similarly, if you're dealing with a current source, you replace it with its internal admittance, which would be 0 if it were an ideal current source, which would then mean that you would have to replace the current source with an open circuit. So this works fine, because fine if you have no control sources, because if you don't have any control sources, doing this does not change the rest of the circuit at all. No voltage or current changes except the VThevenin goes to 0. It works fine. But if you have a control source, then the moment you're trying to drive in current from outside, that will actually change the current somewhere else inside, that will change the control sources. You will no longer be able to maintain the VThevenin equal to 0 by just switching off the batteries or current sources. That's why it's always actually V open circuit by I short circuit. That's always correct. This thing is a shortcut which works provided you have replaced, you could replace the voltage sources without changing anything else in the circuit. You just keep the resistance intact. That you simply can't do if you have control sources. Okay, anything else?
Hello, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, if we have two ideal batteries in parallel or two ideal constant current sources in series, then it
Okay.
apparently seems that there's a violation of Kirchhoff's laws. How do we explain that?
Well, you explain that by saying that that physics is real world. Okay. So basically what this thing, say you have a 6-volt battery and a 3-volt battery. So you put them in parallel and ask what is the voltage here. This is something which simply makes no sense, right?
Yes, sir.
If they were really ideal batteries, you could not possibly put them in parallel this way, because if you put them in parallel, the voltages across them would have to be equal. And unfortunately, there is no way that will happen with ideal sources. But then the resolution to that would be, in the real world, you have Ayush is saying there will be some current due to internal resistance. Well, actually, current will not be a problem. The point is there will be some potential drop due to the internal resistances. Okay. I think you have the correct idea, Ayush, but current was never a problem. Current would always be there anyway. The problem is if these were really ideal batteries, then no matter how much current were driven, there would be no potential drop in the internal resistance. So the 6-volt battery will maintain 6 volt across it, the 3-volt battery will maintain 3 volt across it, and you will be in deep, deep trouble. The way out of the trouble is to understand the world is actually not ideal. So you will have resistances R1 and R2. And depending on the resistances R1 and R2, the potential drop between these two ends will ultimately depend on R1 and R2. Right? If they were equal, then actually it would settle down somewhere in the middle. But if they were not equal, it would depend on which, it could be anywhere between 3 volts and 6 volts. That depends on the R1, R2. Now, once you put in the R1 and R2, then things work out fine. But let me also point out that there's a lesson in this, in the sense that this is one thing which you should never do to real batteries. The batteries should never be put in parallel to each other without external resistances there to control the current. Because if you did this with actual batteries, you're definitely going to damage the batteries, if not start a fire again, by driving way too much current through the wires, which may very well catch fire. So in the ideal case, you really don't have an answer. But the world is not ideal, so you will get some answer. But again, you should really not be doing this at all. I hope I have made myself clear here.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
In fact, you will see this issue of limits and how the limit works. Actually, we had a very interesting discussion on this in the very first lecture on the last year. So if you take a look at last year's playlist, the first discussion class has a discussion on infinite ladders, which is interesting, and we will repeat that later on somewhere down the line. So if anybody is interested, you can take a look at that, and there you will find taking limits becomes a big. In fact, this whole mathematical issue about which limit is taken first, or does the order of taking limits matter, which mathematicians make a lot of noise about, physicists usually ignore, actually becomes very important in questions like these. So anybody who is interested can take a look at that particular question, particular paper, a particular discussion class. That was last year's playlist, which is also there on WeLearn, the very first discussion class there. So we discussed something called Feynman's paradox there. That was more of a sort of bonus lecture. It had nothing to do with the rest of the class much, but still, there are interesting situations which arise if you take these kind of things, especially take the ideal limit too much. But as I said, the world is not really ideal. So in reality, you will get some definite voltage across the two ends, and you will not get a violation of Kirchhoff's laws. But in practice, you should never do this unless you want damaged batteries. Okay, any further questions?
So what if we have both voltages equal, like 6 volt and 6 volt?
Well, if you really had 6 volt and 6 volt, you would get 6 volt. Okay, not a problem. But then you will have to rely very much on the two voltages being exactly equal, because typically what will happen is if you take two different batteries, and you will have to take two different batteries, they will not be exactly identical. So one battery will end up driving power through the other one. Okay, that's a waste of. That way, at least if you have 6 volts and 6 volts, the chances are that you will not start a fire, but you will still be losing out a lot of. Well, you will be draining a good battery simply by making it feed the weaker one. Of course, if they were exactly 6 volts each, things will be perfectly all right. But that again depends on the world being ideal. And as I said, the world isn't. So again, that's something you should not do. Putting cells in parallel is a bad idea. Don't do it. Of course, putting cells which look like they're in parallel but with resistances in between can of course be done. Okay. Then I'm surprised. Has nobody actually seen lecture number 3? Hello? Have you? Yes or no? Okay, and there are no questions about that. You see, some people are saying yes, and some people, and despite that, there are no questions. That's great, but that's actually something new. I think the previous stuff, many of you may have already studied before. Okay, Harsh Talwar, when you say no, I don't know whether you're saying no to you have no questions, or you're saying no to whether you've seen lecture 3.
Yes, sir, I haven't watched lecture 3 right now.
Yeah, but today we were supposed to discuss lecture 3. Okay,
Sir.
we'll do that. Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, in lecture 3,
Hmm.
in Z parameter,
Hmm.
you said that in case of V1, del
Hmm.
V1, del I1 is independent of small I1 and I2. How it can be independent? That small I1 is change of capital I1, right?
Yeah.
So why it is independent of small I1?
Okay, so since many people have not watched the lecture, that I can make out from now. Let me just ask the basic idea. Let me just point out what this is. There is a question about essentially a function of two variables. Suppose a function of x and y. This is a math question. Okay. And x changes to x plus delta x, y changes to y plus delta y. So f of x plus delta x, y plus delta y. So I'm pretty sure you have done this in your maths classes. This is equal to f of x comma y. Of course, if the limit delta x and delta y both go to 0, this is of course exact. But then you have the statement that is, there are additional terms. So this is nothing but Taylor series in two variables. Delta x times what? What is it multiplied by? I hope everybody knows this, right? This is Taylor series in two variables. You must have done this somewhere.
Del F by del X.
So there's a del f del x here. There's del f del y here, right? Plus higher order terms. That is order del x square, delta y square, things like delta x, delta y, these terms. Okay. So once again, if you're doing the linear approximation, you just drop all terms beyond these. So you just drop these terms. Okay. That would be exact for a linear circuit. For a non-linear circuit, this would be an approximation which is valid as long as delta x and delta y are small. But the important question here is this: del f del x, del f del y. Are they partial derivative functions or what are they? What is del f del x?
They are
Is it
the
a number?
partial derivatives evaluated at x and y.
So is it a number or is it a function?
It is a number.
It's a number. It's evaluated at x and y, right? Similarly, del f del y is a partial derivative evaluated at x and y. In the delta x square term, for example, you will have 1 by 2 factorial del 2f del x2 times delta x whole square plus other delta y square set terms. But this derivative is also evaluated at x and y. That's what Taylor series says, right? Each of these derivatives that you see in the Taylor series are really not functions. They're numbers. They're values of the derivatives evaluated at a particular point, right? Everybody agrees with me about that? Yes? No?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then you should be able to see that del f del x evaluated at x comma y, of course, cannot depend on delta x, right? It has nothing to do with delta x. This is the value of you take the function f, however complicated it is, you are just assuming that the function is differentiable. It's a smooth function. That's the assumption which goes in. And if it's a smooth function, its derivative can be evaluated at a particular point. It depends on the point, but does not depend on how big delta x is. Of course, you might say if delta x is very, very big, then this approximation will not be a very good approximation. Because then you should take into account the higher order terms which you have ignored. But that's a different thing altogether. The first order term is always del f del x at x comma y times delta x. Right? By the way, those of you who have done analysis on Rn or will be doing analysis on Rn this semester in math, you would actually know that the derivative is really a map which is a linear approximation of the function, which essentially is a linear map which changes h comma k column vector to something else. And then it doesn't really matter whether h comma k is large or small. That is, h comma k is just delta x delta y, say. It maps delta x delta y into some other thing. In fact, into fx delta x, fy delta y. As far as the linear map is concerned, small, big, etc. doesn't really matter. Of course, is this going to be a good approximation to the change in the function? The answer, of course, depends on whether delta x and delta y are small. But as far as the map is concerned, this map is well defined for all delta x, delta y. It's just a standard linear map. That's what a derivative really is. Okay, whenever you talk of derivatives of differentials, a differential is not an infinitesimal quantity in mathematics. It's really a linear map which maps a vector which represents changes in the argument to another vector which represents changes in the result. Actually, in this case, it would have been fx delta x plus f by delta y. It's a map which maps two numbers delta x delta y into one number. Anyway, that's a mathematical detail. The important point here, as far as this is concerned, is del f del x and del f del y are evaluated at x and y. So in our physical problem, okay, for those of you who have not watched the lecture yet, basically this is about things called two-port networks. So just like you have had one single port, which is a pair of terminals sticking out of a black box for the Thevenin and Norton equivalence, here you have two ports, an input port and an output port. Now this, of course, is very, very important, basically because many of our circuits would have well demarcated input size and output size, and understanding them is easier in terms of this kind of a picture where you have the whole circuit inside, but the source which gives you the input is outside on this on the left, and the output is taken out on the right. Okay, left and right here, of course, is just conventional. You could, of course, put the input on the other side, output on this side. But the important point here is now you have two currents, and here the convention, just for the sake of uniformity, is that the upper terminal is marked plus and the lower terminal marked minus. But that's simply because what you're saying is when the upper terminal is higher in potential than the lower terminal, you're going to say V1 is positive. Same on this side. V2 is positive if the upper terminal is higher than the lower terminal in potential. And I1, I2 are by convention taken to be flowing into the black box. That, of course, doesn't mean that in reality they have to flow in. It just means that they are flowing in is going to be, their flowing in is positive. That's all we are saying here. Okay. And now the basic idea will be that if you took the I1, I2 as independent quantities which control the voltages, you would have something like V1 equal to I1, I2 and V2 equal to I1, I2. So some function, sorry, V1 is some function of I1, I2. V2 is some function of I1, I2. Now this is fine. The only point is this may become, these functions may be very complicated. Okay. But then we ask how much is the change in V1? The answer is delta V1 is going to be del V1 del I1 into delta I1 plus del V1 del I2 into delta I2. But what are these quantities? Are they functions or derivatives or numbers?
Numbers.
Yeah, but in order to understand that, what you have to first of all think is that we are always talking in terms of changes from some reference position. So we say that typically there is maybe some I1 0, I2 0 current flowing in the circuit. That gives you a particular V1, which we're calling V1 0 or V1 star or whatever. Usually it's called V1 Q. And these are called I1 Q, I2 Q, simply because Q is called quiescent voltage or quiescent current. Quiescent simply means you have not given any signal to the circuit, yet it has some voltages or currents. In the lecture, you will find an example of an amplifier circuit where there are voltages and currents simply because there's a battery. The battery creates voltages and currents everywhere in the circuit. And when a signal comes in, this voltage and currents, of course, these get changed. So the question that we are really asking in the case of an amplifier is if I change the input current this much, how much will the output current change? That's the real question. Or if I change the input current this much, how much will the output voltage change? So basically, whatever is there because of the battery, that's already a background. When things change from that, that is what we call a signal. And when you say amplification, you really mean how much is the output voltage signal bigger than the input voltage signal, just for the voltage gain, or how much is the input current signal smaller than the output current signal? That kind of question is being asked. So this is what you're looking at, and these are actually evaluated at the quiescent point. That is, when there is no signal, there is still some current I1, let's call that I1Q or I10 or whatever, and there's still some current I20, and because of these currents which are there, there will be some voltages as well. So what you're doing is evaluating this partial derivative when I1 equals I10, I2 equals I20. Same here. So these partial derivatives do not depend on delta I1. They depend on the quiescent point. Now, of course, if delta I1 is too big, even then these partial derivatives will not depend on delta I1. But then saying that delta V1 is equal to this and ignoring higher order terms, that would be a bad idea. Okay. So what we are doing here is something which is called small signal approximation. We are saying that, okay, apart from the quiescent values, which may be quite large, the signal is small in some sense. Small in the sense that the higher order terms can be ignored. So that's a linear approximation, which may be pretty close to what really is the case for most circuits, but sometimes it fails. Sometimes the approximation is bad. But the important point is when you're starting out with an approximation, it's important to know exactly what approximation you're making. Once you know that, you can go from there and work out corrections. In most of this course, we will stick to the linear part. We will deal with situations where the linear calculation is good enough. However, sometimes you will have to go beyond the linear part. And that, of course, has many nice, interesting results. We will try to explore a few of them, not many. Nonlinear behavior in electronics actually is very, very interesting, and simply because these are ways in which you can study nonlinear dynamics, chaos, and many interesting things, even in electronic circuits. But for the time to understand that, first we will have to understand the simpler part, which is the linear behavior. Okay. So I hope it's clear now why these partial derivatives don't depend on delta I1 and delta I2. Yes. If not, it may not be clear, but then you have to say. Okay, and of course, del V1, del I1 does depend on the quiescent point. So if you have different values of I10, I20, okay, wait a minute. Are you saying I made a silly mistake in lecture 3, or there is a silly mistake in lecture 3? Yeah, there might be. Okay, I will have to check 50, 52, 51, 22 in Z21 values. And 51, it should be Z21 in place of Z12. That might very well be. I might have got it mixed up. So, Shishwa, because I will not have access to this chat once I log out, why don't you do one thing? Why don't you just put this in the discussion forum so that I have a check of this, and so that I can then check and tell you there and everybody there whether that's right. It might very well be true. Just put it in the discussion forum. Everybody, I would ask you again, I'm not sure whether I've asked it formally before. If you have a question, don't mail it to me, because if you mail the question to me, only you get the answer. Put it in the discussion forum. Then I will try to take a look at it and answer it so that everybody gets access to both the question and the answer. That way everybody would benefit. Okay? And as I say, other people are of course free to answer. So I'll have to check. This might very well be true. I don't remember. I vaguely remember that this was brought up last time also, but I'm not very sure whether that was a mistake in this video or some other video. Might very well be this one. Okay. So I will check this and get back to you. But please do put it in the discussion forum. Okay. Anything further?
Sir,
Yeah.
sir, what is the main advantages of using two-port network instead of one-port network?
Okay, what is the main advantage? You will soon see plenty of applications of that. But let me point out one thing. If you're saying one-port network, you're saying that apart from this one end, everything else is inside your black box. Okay. Does it really mean it's inside a black box which you can't peek into? The answer, of course, is no, because say when you're using Thevenin's theorem to analyze a circuit, you're only pretending that the rest of it is inside the black box, right? Because you know what is inside. That's how you actually calculate the VOC and ISC, right? In all these problems, you knew what the circuit exactly was. Okay. But having said that, now suppose I change the battery here inside your circuit. Will you be able to do the calculation with the, or say battery and maybe its internal resistance? You may want to do that, right? Will you be able to use the same Thevenin equivalent for that? Yes or no? For a given circuit, you have a battery with some internal resistance. It's already connected. Everything is done. You calculate its Thevenin equivalent. Then the whole point is you can keep on changing this resistance as much as you want to, or you could even change it to something else. Doesn't matter. This part of the circuit doesn't change, right? You get to use the same VThevenin, same RThevenin. This thing varies. Whatever you connect here, that can vary. Okay. However, if I change the battery here to something else, can I now claim to use it? Now, am I now able to use the same VThevenin, same RThevenin for the calculation? Of course not. That means now you have to recalculate your Thevenin equivalent. On the other hand, suppose you had some complicated circuitry here, whatever is happening, and then there's a battery here, a load resistance here, whatever, something going on here. This may be complicated, but you're not changing that. But you may change your source. You may want to change your load. With a one-port network, either you can put the load outside your black box or the source outside your black box. Whatever is outside your black box, you can change without changing the equivalent circuit for a one-port network. Okay. For a two-port network, the advantage is now you have both the source and the load outside. So you can use the same two-port network equivalent circuit for various different loads, various different sources. Okay, that's the real reason why a two-port network is something which is nice to use when you have possibility of changing the input. And that actually is very, very important when you talk about things like your amplifiers, because amplifiers naturally have an input side and an output side, right? So two-port networks are very, very useful in explaining behavior of amplifiers. We are going to discuss them in great detail later. In fact, the very next lecture, which will be up today or maybe tomorrow morning, I guess, because I can only do that after I return from the institute. So that will actually have an application of two-port networks for a simple circuit. It will be a very simple circuit. So not really a full-grown application in the sense of the kind that we will need later on, but it will actually illustrate the basic ideas. And then you will see that if you were to use a Thevenin equivalent for that circuit, you will only be able to change the resistance, load resistance. But here you can change both the source and the load. And basically, the real reason why you like to use two-port networks is amplifiers are described very, very nicely with them, because there the source is outside, the load is outside. You are only interested in what happens when you change the source, how much the load changes. Okay, you'll see why these are useful, because we will use them in many, many cases, especially in transistor equivalent circuits. Okay, anything else?
Hello, sir. So
Go ahead.
I want to discuss question number 3 of the second assignment.
Okay, question number 3 of the second assignment. Let's see. Yeah. Yes. So what do you need to do here? So what's your question?
Hello, sir. So,
Yeah.
in this question, when we find Norton's current IN, so can you please tell that what to do with this current control current source?
Well, nothing much. It's the current of 1.2 ix, which is an additional branch. So
Okay, so
basically,
this will be
this will drive some extra current, right? So if you find the current through this plus this current, that will be the current through this. So that will contribute to the Norton current. So Norton current would mean you will put a short here. By the way, if you want to find out the current through 6 ohms, something has to be placed outside your black box, right? Everything else will be inside your black box. So what will you place outside your black box? Yes?
Like we can just remove the 6 ohm and put some
Yeah,
wire.
the formal thing is remove the 6 ohm. That is just, okay, and that connecting wire. So basically, take the ports between this point and this point. Okay. However, in this case, life will be easier if you remove the 1 ohm along with the 6 ohm. Can you see? You should be able to see why you can do that. That is, you can say that your 2-port network. Okay, let me just do one thing. Okay, let me open this with TuneNAL itself. Instead of saying that you will take this outside the black box, everything else inside the black box, you could actually also do this. Put the 6 ohm and, of course, if you did that and found out your IN, then in order to find out the current, you would have to replace it again by 6 ohms and 1 ohm in series. Okay, if you were to take these 2 points as the endpoints of your 2 ports sticking out. Why is that an advantage? Because that makes calculating IN and YN easier. Also because the current through 6 ohms and the current through 1 ohm is exactly the same. So taking out 7 ohms instead of 6 ohms actually makes for an easier calculation. That's all I would say. But whichever one you do, if you were to take this, okay, this is a natural thing to do. The question says find out, but because the question just says find out the current across 6 ohms, taking the 1 ohm out along with it will not harm your calculation in any way, and it will make your life easier. So those are the things you should be able to sort of make out. And is there anybody under any doubts as to why it should make it easier? If you are in doubt, you should actually work it out yourself again. But now, I would really like to point out that anyway, you want the IN, right? How do you find the IN? You replace these 2 points by a short. And assuming 6 ohms and 1 ohms have gone in, I would like to replace this by a short. So this is the short joining these 2 points. Okay. So once you have shorted these 2 points, you should be able to calculate how much current flows through this. Okay. Now, if you calculate, for example, if you calculate how much current flows here and how much current flows here, then you will not need the 1.2 ix for any calculate for that. Because the sum of these 2 currents will be the current flowing here. But in order to calculate these 2 currents, you will need the 1.2 ix. Okay. But if you, for example, find out this current, then to that you have to add up 1.2 Ix in order to get the current through this. That's how you use it. Anyway, the moment you connect it like this, now you want to find out the currents in various places. Whatever you do, whether you use nodal or whatever. For example, you could use a nodal method. Of course, one thing that is, if you use a nodal method, the problem would be that can you replace this with an equivalent circuit? Because there's a current source, right? For the nodal method, you would have needed to replace this with a voltage source. You can't, because it's an ideal current source, no impedance across it, right? But what all this tells you is that if you take these three currents as I1, I2, I3, then Ix actually is I2 minus I1. Okay, and this is telling you that I3 minus I1 is 1.2 times Ix. So that gives you a connection between the three currents. Okay, use that. Of course, here the I3 is the short circuit current. So once you solve for I3, you've got your short circuit current.
Sir, I had a question regarding the current control current source.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is it always is it a given rule that for a current control current source, the direction of current will always be given by the arrow which is indicated on it?
If you are indicating that, that's what the arrow is meant to be. Of course, the direction of the current could be opposite that. Is 1.2 Ix in that direction. If Ix is negative, then of course 1.2 Ix is negative. So negative current flowing along that arrow means current flowing in the opposite direction.
Okay, so and for an ideal current source, it will always flow in the direction that it is prescribed, right?
For an ideal current source means fixed current source.
Yeah.
There's no very. This is also an ideal current source, by the way. Ideal or non-ideal means is there a parallel branch through which current can be diverted. Here there is no such thing. So this is also ideal. It's just controlled. Okay. Here this red arrow actually shows you the direction in which current would flow if it were positive. Now, usually what you do is, now if I give a wire like the current source like this, you mean a autonomous current source, a current source independent of anything else, and I wrote -1 amps as the current driven, then that of course would mean current flowing in the opposite direction, but that would be another stupid thing to do, right? Because if you are using a current source, am I still here?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yeah, my power went, but I'm still here. Good. Okay,
so my follow-up question will be like, suppose we have this 18-volt battery, right? Voltage source. So its upper terminal should be at a higher potential, and the lower terminal should be at a lower potential.
Yeah, right.
So does that mean the current will always flow from the higher to low potential, or it can flow in any direction?
No, if there will be, but the only way in which it can flow the other way is there some other higher source. Look, current flowing, a battery is a source of power, right? So inside, note, the point is, when you say current flows from higher to lower potential, it flows from higher to lower potential outside a battery. But inside a battery, it actually flows from lower to higher potential. Why? Because the chemical processes or some other kind of process, depends on what kind of battery it is, that happens inside the battery can force current to flow in the other direction. That is, to flow from lower to higher potential requires energy, and that energy has to come from somewhere. Now, so usually if there is only battery in the circuit, the current will flow in that direction. But if there were other batteries in the circuit or other sources, that could very well flow in the other direction. The other source, say if you had a 5 volts here and a 20 volts here, the current would of course flow like this, right? The 20 volts would superpose on or would overpower the 5 volts. I hope
Okay,
that
so
makes
whatever
sense.
be the whatever be the direction of current or voltage, it will be implemented in the KVL and KCL by the sign change, right?
Yeah.
So we need not need to worry about that.
You don't have to worry about whether you've taken the current correctly. However, here, for example, this is Ix and this is 1.2 Ix. The point is, if this current is flowing to the right, this current will also flow to the right. Okay, but if this had been Ix and this had been minus 1.2 Ix, then if this current flow to the right, then this current would flow to the left. But usually, instead of writing this as minus 1.2 Ix, I would usually write this with 1.2 Ix with an arrow pointing the other way.
Okay, yeah, I was a bit confused about the notation actually.
Yeah, you would usually not put in a negative value in front, but if it's a control source, it's possible. Ix might come out to be negative. Then, of course, if Ix is on the left, 1.2 Ix will also be towards the left. Okay, I think we have overshot time, because this was only an hour slot. Many of you may have classes after this. So won't controlled current source increase Ix too? Might not, depends on how it's connected. But ultimately, whatever Ix you have in the circuit, this current will be 1.2 times that. Anyway, let's call it a day today. See you again on Monday. Let's stop the recording and